Aadhaar debate reignites again. Now, India's largest public sector bank, SBI, has alleged that there has been a data breach in the Aadhaar system.
The state bank authorities have claimed that their Aadhaar data has been misused. They have told the UIDAI authorities that the vendors have misused the biometrics and the Aadhaar details to procure fake Aadhaar cards.
But UIDAI has rubbished all the charges made by SBI, also reiterating that no security breach has taken place and the reports are incorrect and irresponsible. The story came to light after an Aadhaar operator in SBI was fined 33 lakhs for allegedly misusing the system to generate unauthorized Aadhaar cards.
तो मेरी आईडी जो स्टेशन आईडी है उसके अंदर किसी बंदे ने उसको हैक करके या उसको क्रैक करके फर्जी स्टेशन आईडी 143 स्टेशन आईडी जनरेट की और उसके अंदर फर्जी आधार कार्ड बनाए जिसमें मतलब लगभग 25,000 के लगभग फर्जी आधार कार्ड हैं और जो UIDAI की तरफ से मेरे पास मेल आई है कंपनी के द्वारा उसमें 333 आधार कार्ड ऐसे पाए गए हैं जो मतलब बगैर डॉक्यूमेंट के बने हुए हैं.
But SBI internal investigation found that the operator is innocent and someone must have hacked the system and generated unauthorized Aadhaar cards.
Well, this is what reporters have been talking about for a very long time as far as the Aadhaar system is concerned. And the thing that concerns me most about this story is that the individual on your screen, who was a third-party vendor hired by SBI to enroll people, had money stolen out of his own account. So obviously someone had falsified his details, entered the Aadhaar database on his behalf, and they also managed to conduct several transactions, including withdrawing money from his bank accounts. Now, we've been told over and over again that gaining access to your Aadhaar details will not give someone access to your bank accounts and to your money and to all of your other details. It seems in this particular case, it will. And we still don't know how this happened. So for the UIDAI to simply rubbish SBI at this point, the State Bank of India, and not look into the matter is the thing that should concern us most of all. On the show, Vinit Goenka for the BJP, Ravindra Gupta, Joint Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation, Pallavi Sharma for the Congress, Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate for the Supreme Court, Pavan Duggal, cyber law expert, Amit Arora is the Deputy News Editor of the Times of India in Chandigarh, who wrote the story in the Times of India, and Rachna Khaira, an investigative journalist with HuffPost India, who has spent a lot of time on this matter. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Amit Arora, my first question to you. In the story, you talk about the fact that Vikram, who is the victim of this fraud, lost money out of his bank account as well. Do you have reason to believe that this loss from his bank account happened because someone stole his Aadhaar details?
You see, there are two things here which I would like to point out.
Yes.
So far, whenever we have any news media has reported Aadhaar breach, there have been three hallmarks of UIDAI's response to it. So one is that there's a cloak of secrecy; they will not share the details. The other is that they just issue standard denials. No matter what questions you ask, I send them a list of 15 questions. They sent me a 5-sentence response. They are always unanswered questions. And also, so far, all the breaches that we heard about, wrote about, involved other information, not the biometrics. So this is the first case where biometric fingerprints of the operator were misused to withdraw money from his own accounts. And not one, two different accounts at two different places. And there is no explanation forthcoming.
Also, Amit, obviously the accusation at this point is that Vikram, who worked as the Aadhaar operator at the SBI branch, says fake Aadhaar or falsified Aadhaar details, cards or IDs have been made using his vendor details. Would this generally give us a notion that
That's right.
the Aadhaar system can be hacked? Does it mean the Aadhaar system is vulnerable? Can you help us understand where the weakness is here? What is the weakness here?
So, see, what happened in Vikram's case can be divided into two parts.
Yes.
One, as I just explained, is the withdrawal of money from his own accounts using his fingerprint. The other, but more complex, but also the more important issue is that any operator is sitting there under CCTV camera surveillance in the bank. And while he's sitting there, somewhere else, somebody else is using his fingerprints, his login ID, his user password, and generating hundreds and hundreds of Aadhars. So, and you look at, so we managed to get the detailed error list from the UIDAI officials. It clearly shows when you look at the details in the thing. It has the enrollment number, it has the time stamp, date stamp, and the user ID. The user ID, which also has the station ID or the laptop or the desktop, that is the device that is used.
Yes.
So that varies, but other data remains same. And in that you can see that they have been generating, whosoever used his login IDs, generated hundreds and hundreds of Aadhars within a fraction, within a minute's fractions, like 1 second, one Aadhar, second Aadhar, in third second is generated third Aadhar. This definitely can't be done manually, right? Somebody has to put his thumb on the machine and it has to be read by the machine, recognized, and then the enrollment number would be generated. So this clearly defies any theory that anybody could say that okay, he got out of his seat somehow, went elsewhere. All the multi-station IDs also have to be GPS enabled, so it's very clear whether the person is sitting. Now only UIDAI can actually access that information and explain that okay, where were these people sitting when whosoever used it. Nobody else can explain that. And the
UIDAI is refusing to explain at this point. I also have a question for Ravindra Gupta, Joint Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation. Mr. Gupta is also an employee of SBI. Mr. Gupta, there was, of course, a confusion of whether the problem here was on the part of the bank, SBI, and its vendors, or was it the UIDAI? The UIDAI has, of course, said there's no problem in its system, everything is fine. Does this put unnecessary pressure on bank employees?
In fact, first I want to make it clear that Vikram is not the employee of State Bank of India. In fact, this activity has been shifted to the banks in the last 6 months and more. In fact, this enrollment and registration, it was done by the vendors, those who are appointed by the UDI. But now this activity has been shifted to some designated branches of the public sector banks. In this case, these vendors are there, those who have been using the premises of the banks, and they are making this enrollment and this registration for the customers, because the bank has been given the large targets to get the people enrolled for this Aadhaar cards. So the people those are coming to the bank branches, those are enrolled there. And there is one more point I just want to make it clear, that this employee of the vendors, the vendor are doing this activity, and they have been provided with the devices maybe the laptops, and those are the IDs created. And in fact, that multiple ID creation is only that is constituted available to the banks only. If a person is using it at the multiple devices on the multiple places, so he cannot do this. In this case, the Vikram case, the penalty of 33 lakh has been imposed on him, and it is a vindication of the stand that Aadhaar is not very foolproof, and there is a breach into that. And independent inquiry done by the SBI and the vendor, they found that Vikram is innocent, and in fact his fingerprint, biometric and his password has been hacked, and it has been used at the multiple places where Vikram has not gone. And in fact, some money has also been withdrawn from his account. And we have been raising this point for a long time, that Aadhaar card was only basically, it was for a limited purpose. It was only a targeted delivery of the financial and the subsidies and the some benefits and some other services. Those were needed to be offered. But linking with the banking system, and it becomes a very dangerous. I just want to provide one data that 170 crore accounts are there in the banking system, and out of that 70 crore account has already been linked with the Aadhaar card. Since Supreme Court has now stopped this further linking of cards with the banking system, but just I also want to make it one point that what about the delinking of these Aadhaar cards with the banking system?
Yes.
This is more important, and this still there these accounts are at the risk at any point, because Aadhaar has a limited purpose.
Yes,
so
it's being used far beyond its purpose
banks are pressurized to do the Aadhaar linkage, enrollment from their branches. So they have been appointing the vendors. In the last case, you find that 250 people were penalized by the UIDAI. And in fact, most of them found to be innocent, because there is a breach, there is a hacking possibility in the site.
Okay, Mr. Gupta. Okay. Let me take the question to Vinit Goenka of the BJP. Mr. Goenka, the worrying part here, for me at least, is that the country's largest public sector bank, SBI, has done its investigation, has turned around and said the database is not secure. There is a problem of hacking right now. This needs to be looked at. And we have the UIDAI, which is another government agency, turning around and rubbishing those, those requests and rubbishing those allegations. There's something seriously wrong. And do you think it's a problem right now that the UIDAI is not willing to investigate?
No, I think probably, it has been blown out of context by this particular panel here right now. The database is quite safe. There are two different things. Somebody doing a fraud and another is a breach. There is no breach. I maintain, and what the UIDAI also said, the government also said, there is no breach. If there is a fraud, it can be investigated. If there, in this particular case, there was some irregularities been found by the operator, he's been fined. If he disputes that, he can always go to the court. So I think probably we'll have to go what the UIDAI said. There is no breach. This database is quite safe.
So if I understand correctly, you're effectively saying that SBI is blowing, the State Bank of India is not to be trusted here, which is odd because we give the State Bank of India all our money on a regular basis.
No. See, it is probably the vendor who has done that, and what mistake has been done has to be seen in the investigating papers. If somebody has
but nobody is investigating
a deliberate attempt to do a fraud, or maybe there are procedurals. How do you know that?
Because SBI conducted an investigation, the UIDAI has fined the vendor. There is no investigation on right now.
You said there is nobody investigating that. How do you know that? Why are you making this kind of irresponsible statements?
No, don't get angry. This is not that kind of show. Amit Arora, Deputy News Editor of the Times of India.
In a banking system. No. In a bank, let me tell you. Let me tell you. No. You are making a statement. Nobody is investigating. So please
I'm telling you that nobody is investigating. Okay, you tell me. You're in the government. Who's investigating this case right now? Who's investigating the case right now?
You are in the government. Why don't you tell us who's investigating them?
There is a set procedures. If there is a... So I would request you to have some patience to hear it out, because what is happening is you are announcing your judgments. I can understand your agenda, I can understand your anxiety about this, but if there is any kind of processor breach, or there is an anticipation of process breach, both in any bank or in UIDAI, there are set procedures to investigate it, irrespective whether there is a complaint been made or not. So there is a self-triggered investigation which happens in all the banks, and also otherwise the country would have fallen down, otherwise the processes would have fallen down.
Fair enough.
There have been investigation, internal investigation been done, and if these kind of things comes up, then there are an external investigation which happens. The police also comes in picture. There are crime investigation units which comes in picture. Finance, there are fraudulent units which do anti-fraud units which comes in action. So they have been done, and if there are procedural break, then there is penalty which is levied. If there is somebody who wants to dispute this, yes, he has a right to go to the court. Microscopic minority has already gone to the court, and they have got the judgment. I think there is no dispute right now on that.
Okay, may I speak now if you're done? So this self-triggered investigation that you say the bank will conduct, the bank has conducted it, and no less than the State Bank of India has conducted it. And the State Bank of India has found the vendor in this case innocent. The State Bank of India has turned around and made this statement that was carried on the front page of the Times of India this morning, saying that there is a problem of hacking, there it is, logging, biometrics of Aadhaar operators are being misused. unauthorized Aadhaar cards are being generated. And this is the State Bank of India. We have raised the issue with the UIDAI. The UIDAI should be more transparent with us. The UIDAI should let us know how this is happening. The UIDAI should make their database more secure. I'm quoting the Times of India and its statement from SBI. Mr. Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, let me point out that this vendor whose bite we ran on the channel, to ask him to go to court, and he's filed a police complaint for the money that was stolen from his account, but to ask him to go to court if he has a problem is completely unfair. And the triggered self-investigation from SBI shows very clearly that biometrics can be hacked according to the bank and can be used to steal money from your bank account. So if Vineet Goenka says he understands my panic at this point, of course I'm panicking. I don't want people to steal money from my bank account. Kailash Vasudev, please go ahead.
Good evening. Once this kind of a complaint comes up, it involves a very detailed investigation. The worry then becomes, how did this happen? And if it has happened, how secure is the Aadhaar system? It links up to that position where questions start arising, doubts start arising, and these doubts are also raised in the Supreme Court, where certain cautions were sounded insofar as the Aadhaar base is concerned. The provisions of the Act give authority to the authority for carrying out any kind of an investigation and lodging complaints. It excludes the individual from coming up. They sought to amend this in the Amendment Act, which hasn't come through as yet. But the biggest problem is if the basis of the complaint is that the data system maintained under the Aadhaar is not secure, then a lot of eyebrows are going to go up. Mr. Goenka just mentioned that there's an internal system for inquiring into this, looking into it, where there's a fraud, there are proceedings available. But under the Aadhaar Act, there is no individual right available. It is only to the authority which can initiate action. Therefore, if the individual is now complaining,
That's right.
I think the authorities under the UIDAI, because this is an act in good governance, it is an act in good governance, it is in the larger public interest. I'm quoting from the Supreme Court judgment and the arguments propounded by government. If both these elements are there, the UIDAI should be open and frank in telling this gentleman if there's been a mistake or whatever, and investigate the matter and give him a report, because his rights have been affected.
Yes.
So the judgment of the Supreme Court says that the individual rights should not be trammeled, have been trammeled over here. Therefore, the whole situation now is coming back where you might require a complete relook at the Aadhaar system, because the linking to the other accounts has been prohibited by the court. But what happens to those 70 odd crores which have been linked? The Supreme Court says delete them in 3 to 6 months. That have not been deleted. They still exist. They are in all sorts of hands, including people who are not supposed to receive it after the Supreme Court judgment. So you see, the situation is as clear as mud, if I may say so, because there is no deletion, there is no compliance, there is a situation where an individual is feeling that he has been troubled. The investigating process is not open. The UIDAI says that no, there is nothing wrong with the system, but something has gone wrong to the individual. Who is going to give him redress? The redress has to come either through the Aadhaar system, or the State Bank has to make a firm statement that there has been some kind of a breach in the system operated by the State Bank connected to the Aadhaar.
Right. And I want to just take this back to Amit Arora, who is the journalist who filed the story. Amit, obviously, and I understand that Vikram has written to the UIDAI, he's filed a complaint with the police, he's written to the district collector, he's written to the chief minister, he's written to the prime minister to ask him now to also go to court. And I want you to just explain SBI's stand in this particular case, in your story specifically. Was this a statement from SBI, and is what did it say specifically? Does SBI confirm that the database of the UIDAI is not secure?
See, there's no question that, SBI could say anything else, because if this is happening and they are the registrar, only they can activate the multi-station IDs for any operator that is employed by the agency that they subcontract. In absence of their role, it could not have been done. Now, if that is the case, then SBI officials should be prosecuted. But UIDAI has not done that simply because it knows. And it's not just once. SBI officials told me that they have approached UIDAI at least 5 or 6 times in last 1 year. That's around the time when banks were given the given the task of generating Aadhars. Now, here two more things that I would like to point out.
Yes.
Firstly, that Vikram tried to file a complaint with police, but it's been over a month. He has not been able to get it done. Today, probably that FIR is being launched after it has come in the news. Second point that I would like to make is that any institution, just like a human being, has to earn the trust of the people it interacts with. Election Commission today has a standing, and when it says something, people believe that. It's been 10 years that Aadhar or UIDAI came into existence, and till today I don't see the trust in that institution, and for that UIDAI is to blame, nobody else.
Pawan Dugal, we've seen enough of these cases. Pawan Dugal, do you think that it's important right now for the UIDAI? Can the UIDAI walk away and say that we're not going to look into it? These are rubbish charges being made by the biggest public sector bank in the country.
I think here is a peculiar situation that's been brought forward by the Aadhaar Act. The UIDAI has been made the only sole authority to lodge a complaint. Now, if the person or the authority who's authorized to lodge a complaint itself wants to bat with its eyes closed and continue to shout from the top of the rooftop to say, well, I'm secure and there's no breach, where is the question of any redress mechanism available? Now, Amit has said that the FIR has been launched today. I'm not so sure, because under the Aadhaar Act, the FIR can only be lodged as per the complaint of the UIDAI. But this particular incident has once again demonstrated in crystal clear terms that there's nothing known as cyber security on the biometrics or the central identities data repository. Merely rubbishing these claims would not help. The question is, if there is a fraud taken place, the fraud could not have taken place without unauthorized access to the biometric database, and without the use of the same at different places in different locations by automated means, included by software or by bots. That being so, this constitutes a very, very serious cyber security breach, not just in the Aadhaar ecosystem of what we have been talking all these days. It's now a breach of central identities data repository, because the biometric information is not in the entire ecosystem. It's the central identities data repository. And that being so, I think it's extremely serious. It could be a breach of protected system. On the other hand, it should be the UIDAI who should go and lodge a complaint and get a case registered against the unknown people. Rather than saying that I'm 100% secure, it's much more wiser, practical and prudent for UIDAI to say, hold on, if this has happened, we will investigate, we will try our level best. Because at the end of the day, it's the collective case of the Indian nation that the Aadhaar central identities data repository must be safe and secure. And that Indians who have already given their biometric information should not be prejudicially impacted in any manner whatsoever. But I think this is one of the most serious incidents that's come up, and it crystal clearly shows, mind you, here the complainant is not an individual. Here the person complaining is a legal entity being established under an act of parliament, the State Bank of India. And if that, the biggest bank in the country, has come up with these kind of conclusions after detailed investigations, I think the clock is ticking. The time is now back on UIDAI to explain to the nation what has it done. Merely rubbishing these claims won't suffice.
Pallavi Sharma of the Congress party is also with us. Pallavi Sharma, obviously, any government in power, at the end of the day, if our database is not safe, if our bank accounts are not safe, then a thorough investigation from the inside out needs to be conducted. Pallavi.
I'd just like to make 3 or 4 quick points since you come to me at last. Just give me 30-40 seconds. Point number one, there's a talk about an internal inquiry that has been conducted by SBI. Yes, SBI has given clean chit to the vendor, but the question arises, is that enough? We are limiting ourselves to only one aspect, which is that the money was stolen from his bank account, the bank account was hacked. But I was hearing the courageous journalist, I think, who just broke the story, who was talking about it and said several fake Aadhars were also generated. Now, how worrisome is that? So you remember the sole purpose of Aadhaar that the government launched it was with, that it will be a proof of identity. Now, if that purpose sole stands violated, then what is the use of Aadhaar? How is the government going to defend it? Point number two that I'd like to make, the government made an argument, the government attorney made an argument in the Supreme Court saying that the Aadhaar data is protected by 13 feet high and 5 feet thick walls. Clearly, that argument, though it was technically also flawed, has fallen flat on the face today. Aadhaar can be breached and the government really needs to pull up its socks and look into it. Now, all of us on the panel would remember one man named Abhinav Srivastav. Not long ago, he has held a 6-hour step-by-step demo. He has given a step-by-step demo to the sleuths, showing them how Aadhaar can be hacked. So obviously this argument of the UIDAI that the Aadhaar data cannot be breached, it's not hackable, is false. The government needs to look into it. Third, Faye, one important argument, you see the Congress party stands vindicated on one aspect. This is what happens when you try to violate the basic principles of the constitution and the basic running, functioning principles of the parliament. The government launched the Aadhaar bill as a money bill. They bypassed the Rajya Sabha. Mr. Jairam Ramesh, a stalwart leader from the Congress party, has put a petition to that aspect before the Supreme Court. But we were only proposing certain amendments in the parliament. I wish the government had heard the Congress party and various stakeholders out there. Such breaches and such serious issues of national security would not have arisen today.
All right, I have one last voice to bring in before I can open it up for rebuttals, and that's Rachna Kaira. Rachna, you broke the story first about the fact that vendor details were being used to generate fake Aadhaar IDs. This story that Amit has now broken today confirms the story that you had filed some time ago. Is this what you've been talking about from the beginning?
Exactly, Faye, if you have noticed, a very crucial point that has been put across by Amit was that Aadhaar was generated every second. Every second there was an Aadhaar generation on the name of by the login ID, multiple login IDs that were created on Vikram's ID. This itself proves, you know, the story which we are following. We have done two stories. One is about the patch, the other is about the multiple login IDs that's been created. See what has happened, just to make your viewers, understand the whole system as to why this story, in fact, had cropped up. It has just popped up. The reason is that the Aadhaar, there were multiple login IDs created. So it is not just like one Vikram. Vikram, like, you know, these kind of VLEs are available everywhere. Every second person, you know, who's working an Aadhaar, you know, who's working on an Aadhaar job is a Vikram right now, because they are working on these patches. They are in possession of the software. They are using it. Like, if you see the kind of errors that has been identified by the UIDAI was that the picture quality was not good. As we have highlighted in our, software hack story, that the patch has disabled, basically, it has reduced the sensitivity of the enrollment software iris recognition system, making it easier to spoof the software with a photograph. Now, once you reduce the sensitivity, so you automatically can reduce, the kind of pictures, the picture quality. Now, here what has happened was that they have, disabled the GPS system. Now, the debate should have been, more on, like, it is not a debate that has now been limited to that whether there was a breach or whether there was no breach. The question is that now how the government is going to identify the fake Aadhaar cards from the system, whether they're going to, how it is going to identify where these fake Aadhars can be, are going to be used in future, what the government is doing to identify them. So these are the questions which needs to be investigated, needs to be answered. As far as this particular story is concerned, what seems to, since I have not investigated the story, but what I can make it out from my ground experiences, that Vikram, someone must have picked up the Vikram login and password, and has clubbed it with the patches and has sold it to, must have sold it to all these various VLEs who are blacklisted, whose machines were unregistered, and that is how the victim, because these people have disabled the system.
Yes.
So as far as the biometrics are concerned, they have not misused the biometrics. It was the fake, thumb impressions, or the what you say. They have used the other kind of synthetic fingerprints. So with the help of, they have bypassed the biometrics also. With the help of those bypassing the biometrics, they have managed to use the places. So that is how it must have been done.
Well, Vinit Goenka is back with us. You've heard all the arguments. I have a very simple question. Should we believe the State Bank of India, or should we believe the UIDAI? Which agency at this point, and because there are two agencies of the government, should we place more stock in?
So I think you can believe both the agencies. UIDAI has been maintaining one thing, I think after the investigations have been done. And if you read Times of India, it says the investigation been done, it has not been shared. So probably, we will have to believe that there was no system failure, there is no breach. If there is some procedural delay, or there is something which has been done by the vendor or the operator sitting there, that will be investigated. And see, in this particular case also, one of them has been fined. The fine has been put because there was breach has been done by that person, not in the database, but in the procedures to be followed. So the law has been taken. And moreover, those who feel there is some dispute, they are most welcome to go to the court.
Okay, Mr. Goenka, I can't believe both SBI and UIDAI at the same time.
No,
because the
Faye,
UIDAI, one second. The UIDAI has fined the individual, like you said. SBI has investigated and said the individual is innocent and the fine is unfair. The UIDAI has refused to relent. So at this point, these two entities of the government, these two agencies of the government are saying two opposite things. How are we to believe both? So either SBI is lying or UIDAI is lying. Which one
they
is
are
it?
not opposite thing. No, probably you will have to ask SBI what is there, because I don't represent SBI. But I think probably you will have to go through the statement of UIDAI. There is no breach. The question which you have asked, and it is very simple, there is no problem with the database or the operating system or the access control. Where there was flaws by the particular operator Vikram, I think probably he was fined for his process violation. And once somebody does a process violation, there is a dispute, then there are fines. In case he wants to dispute the particular fine, so that he has not done that, he can always approach the court. There is wrong. There is a relief available in the court.
Okay, I'm opening this up for rebuttals. Pallavi Sharma's hand is up. Pallavi, go ahead.
Who is this lady?
Faye, just 10 seconds,
and let me tell the Congress. I didn't want to answer to the Congress
Faye,
person because
just
she's
10
not
quick
paid.
seconds. I think Mr. Goenka is missing the core point here.
One at a time,
Faye, please, can I speak?
Pallavi Sharma will speak now. 1 second. Pallavi Sharma, go ahead.
He has no substantial argument to make, so he keeps interrupting me every time. Yes, he's missing the core point of this entire discussion. Had he heard the journalist who broke the story, he pointed out very categorically that the vendors, so to name here, Mr. Vikram's biometrics were breached. The UIDAI password and ID that had been given to him, which was his, to make these Aadhaar cards, was first breached using his biometrics, and then a number of Aadhars were generated using his UIDAI ID and password. His own bank account has been hacked into. So what argument is Mr. Goenka?
I'm just going to open this up. I want to go back to Ravindra Gupta of the All India Bank Officers Confederation. Mr. Gupta, do you want to rebut what Vinit Goenka said? Because the SBI has done its independent investigation and said the fine was unfair. This was not the vendor violating the rules or breaking the rules. Mr. Gupta.
No, one important observation that is in the Times of India today, it says even more baffling was the misuse of the Vikram's personal biometric fingerprints in this case to generate Aadhaar cards, carry out the unexplained transactions at the places like the IT department, Maharashtra government, MP government, National Information Center and the various banks, and even withdrawn money from his personal account. So Mr. Vikram is sitting at one place somewhere and his password has been used at so many other places. This is the observation of the Times of India. So this says that in fact what the Vikram is saying. And see how this thing has happened.
Yes, we have to
This
find
is
out how this has
important issue.
happened.
Yeah.
And in fact,
This is very simple, Faye, because they have disabled the machines, they have disabled the GPS system. The machine can work without the GPS system for 8 hours. You just have to fill in the GPS, you have to log in the GPS for 8 hours. It can work without, see, if I'm sitting in Jalandhar, I can just, log in as my place to be like Jalandhar, and I can go and travel to Chandigarh, get the enrollment done for 2-3 hours, and I can just come back. So
Okay.
I've got 8 hours to do the enrollment. And I just want to highlight very important point here as far as the bank is concerned. Mr. Gupta, banks cannot go away with the responsibility. The bank, you are saying that Vikram was not an employee. Vikram, though, was not an employee, but you have a nodal officer in every branch. Every branch has got a nodal officer who was provided training for a day, single day. They were asked to keep a check on them. But unfortunately, the banks have, deputed the nodal officers who are either cashiers, who are either, of some high officials. They do not even have time to go there, and they do not know whether they do not have any identify between a patch and other things. So government, the SBI is also equally responsible for that.
Okay, 1 second. Amit Arora, who filed the story. Amit, do you have a response for Vinit Goenka, who said that for his first comment was believe both the SBI and the UIDAI?
So I have a response to that, but before that I would like to also point out that what is, as I have written in the copy also, is the most baffling withdrawal of money from his personal accounts. For that his fingerprint was used. If you might have noticed that across India so many banks are now putting up ATMs in their kiosk, which are enabled with or have a small place where you can put your thumb, and instead of punching your PIN number, you just put your thumb in there. It will scan your thumb impression and it will give out the money.
Yes.
Now, if this is what is happening with one person's fingerprints, what is to say that this will not happen with more people tomorrow? That is the part that worried me more. Of course, generating fake Aadhars is a national security issue, has all kind of implications, but that is something that UIDAI has to look inside and see what they can do about it. Even before that, they have to figure out whether banks should go ahead with launching these ATMs with the thumb impression enabled machines.
Mr. Kailash Vasudev wants to respond. Mr. Vasudev, go ahead.
And
go ahead. The strange part in this whole imbroglio is the pot calling the kettle black. State Bank says there's an investigation which reveals an Aadhaar breach. Aadhaar says there's nothing wrong. Now go back in history and look at the Aadhaar programs on your the Aadhaar presentations on your program. Punjab Kesari revealed a lot of breaches. There were breaches in Faridabad. Mr. Dhoni was totally tampered with. People were not given the benefits of Aadhaar. Now, the Aadhaar structure which is there is now coming into question, notwithstanding the observations of court, that a certain amount of caution has to be exercised with regard to data banks. If the data banks can be compromised, Aadhaar is not going to subserve its purpose. It is going to play havoc because it's an institution in national interest, as the Supreme Court says. I'm using the word Supreme Court deliberately because the government succeeded there on their own arguments that this was a protected system. The protection of the system doesn't appear to be there. If the protection of the system is not there, then please follow the Supreme Court order to delete all information with regard to banking and the like, not related to the grant of subsidies within 6 months. More than 6 months have gone, data has not been deleted. You are not doing anything for the purposes of implementing the privacy laws, which come into play notwithstanding what anybody may say. The Aadhaar itself has been held to be an act for a specific purpose, which is now being defeated with these kind of intrusions, because the data of everybody is available, connected to everything which was taking place. Because in those days, you had passports, you had gun licenses, you had weapons, you had driving license, everything linked to the Aadhaar. Please delete all that information. That will be in the first interest of the nation, because a lot of information will not go through. Second, If there is a doubt about the integrity of the Aadhaar environment, please look into it rather than saying you're washing your hands off. Please tell the public also as to what has been done with regard to the exposés which have come in the past few years about data of the individuals being available or being hacked at some point of time or the other. I've mentioned the Punjab Kesari, I've mentioned the Faridabad cases, I've mentioned Dhoni's accounts. So please tell us what you have done with regard to these. If you have done nothing, then we would take it that you have no answer to what the State Bank has to say, and this kind of a situation will continue, notwithstanding cautions which you're supposed to take.
Mr. Goenka, if you want to respond, see the whole fear, we've been assured up till now that even if somebody has your Aadhaar details, they cannot access your bank account. This story would prove otherwise. Vineet Goenka.
See, you know what? You asked me this question anyway, in any form, in any language. Answer is same. You know, you have been trying for last 2 years to bring out something, you know, which is, there is some problem. Even after the Supreme Court has given the judgment, even after, you know, the arrest Sharma challenge which has come up, I don't see any reason why people should doubt Aadhaar or the integrity of the system there or the breaches which have been talked about. None of this address the issue. I think on all these people, even after the Supreme Court judgment, when they talk about this, then I start doubting whether the Supreme Court actually got all the information at hand, because this information which is coming here could have been given to Supreme Court, and like they are making the case here, they could have done it in the Supreme Court, and probably the learned judges would have taken cognizance of that. So I think what, you know, these are individual views, we respect them. In a democracy, they should air that. But the honest answer is, there is no problem. So when there is no problem, you can't solve the problem. And to answer the Congress representative, let me just enlighten her. All the contracts were given by the UPA government and they are answerable to this country. Why did they appoint, or why did they bring Aadhaar at the first go? One. And why these contractors came? And number three, making irresponsible statements on the media does not help.
Okay, Kailash Vasudev will respond first because of that. You know, 1 second, I will allow you to respond to him. Kailash Vasudev first, the comment about the Supreme Court. The second part, that there is nothing wrong, there's no problem, and if there's no problem, then no solution is required. Kailash Vasudev, go ahead.
Supreme Court exercised caution. It upheld the Aadhaar Act on the basis of what the government had to say. It struck down certain provisions which made it very clear that this was not to be used as a commercial medium in handing out Aadhaar information. When it did pass its judgment, many an issue came up before the court, and it also adverted to having a safe environment. Today, after the Supreme Court judgment, all these situations are arising where Aadhaar is being hacked or the system is being breached into at the cost of individual citizens. If that is happening, isn't it time for the government to have a relook at the whole situation? We'll go to the court, people will of course invoke the court. This gentleman who's been affected, whose UIDAI is not filing a case, he's going privately to the place and asking for a private complaint. He has no option because he's been hit. If he's been hit and the situation is open to being hacked, it is time we relooked at it instead of saying that everything is all right. If everything was all right, we wouldn't be discussing this matter on your program on the basis of a report by a press reporter who's done his groundwork and reported the matter. No one has denied the press reports. Everybody has acted on them because he has disclosed it. The gentleman has had the courage to come forward and say, State Bank has said this is what UIDAI has done, please look into the matter and do something. So you're not denying the report. The authenticity of the person wanting to go and file a complaint of losing money in his accounts are not being denied. So if these facts are there, then we are very clear that there is something wrong with the working of the system. Please look into it instead of saying there's nothing wrong. This is the easiest way of passing an individual away. We all come and go, but this is frustrating.
Pawan Dugal, and you know, this is a cyber security question.
Account, many of us didn't go.
Yes, the cyber security question, Pawan Dugal, is can any database ever be completely safe? Can we turn around and say this is completely safe? There's no need to have conversations about it anymore at any point.
I think it's a fallacy of an argument.
They admitted
There's nothing known as absolute, complete security. No database in the world is completely secure. And that being the case, the same principle applies to Aadhaar database as well. This is a database that's leaking from all sides. This is a database that is urgently crying for a cyber security audit. And you'd be surprised to know that in the last 1 decade, there's not yet any specific cyber security audit that's been done by an independent agency outside the UIDAI. The UIDAI becomes the party, it becomes a judge, it becomes a prosecutor, and it becomes all in all. The fact of the matter remains, today the cyber security aspects remain to be dramatically addressed, which they have not yet been addressed. And imagine, now the threats have already been coming in that, look, we will be tampering with your election process in the coming elections from hackers outside the world. Now, consider that, and consider that Aadhaar has been hacked. The chances and overlap of these kind of things happening is relatively high. So if the elections could be hacked, and if this has happened in our country, now the doors are going to be opened up where hackers will say, okay, we will play with your Aadhaar database at will. And that being so, I think people's confidence in the ability of the Aadhaar ecosystem, specifically the Aadhaar Central Identities Data Repository, to deliver to the promise that we are sacrosanct, that we will actually protect your data, has not yet been fulfilled. So I think a lot of focus has to come back on the government, has to come back on UIDAI. Mere rhetoric is not going to suffice. Yes. Mere denial will not suffice. You require concrete proof. And unfortunately, there's no concrete proof available as of now to show exercise of due diligence pertaining to protection of cyber security of the Aadhaar biometric database.
Pallavi Sharma of the Congress responds to the statement made by Vineet Goenka that this was brought in by the Congress to begin with. And he's right, it was brought in by the Congress. In fact, you signed on third-party vendors who are not even Indian to handle our database.
You know, Faye, let me begin by thanking Mr. Goenka that he's at least agreed on the show that the Congress party was the brain behind the Aadhaar. But the Aadhaar that we see today, the Aadhaar Act, the Aadhaar Bill, is a grotesque misrepresentation of the Aadhaar that was, brainstormed and channelized by the Congress party. Mr. Jairam Ramesh, anybody can Google that parliament debate that happened, and Mr. Jairam Ramesh gave a befitting reply to Arun Jaitley on the floor of the House in the Rajya Sabha and said, see, these are few 9 amendments that the Congress party proposes. Please do not introduce Aadhaar as a money bill and don't bypass the Rajya Sabha. Consider these amendments. But the government behaved as usual in a tyrannical fashion, in a dictatorial fashion, and bypassed all those amendments that we proposed. Keeping that aside today, Faye, I want to make just 2 or 3 quick points. Point number 1, you see, this blatant abuse and this tyrannical fashion in which this government and its agencies function needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. You see what the UIDAI is doing. Under the Aadhaar Act, it's the sole agency that can investigate, register complaints, and proceed with the investigation. But without doing any of it, it has come forward and, blatantly imposed a fine of 33 lakh rupees on the poor vendor who himself is saying that, look, I am the victim here. Money has been stolen from my bank account as well. Your systems are not secure. There's been breach in your system. My biometrics have been breached, and you are imposing fine on the poor vendor himself. Point number 2, Faye, the Supreme Court in its judgment clearly set out a guideline and a directive and said that all the data needs to be erased that has been shared with the private and public agencies. But why has that data not been erased? Why has the government not, come out with the notification or ordered or authorized the agencies to delete all the data that is in their possession? It clearly, you can see through the intent of the government here. It needs to act on it quickly before such incidents, increase in number. Point number 3, in 2012, Faye, in 2012, this is an important point, a committee was set up by the then Planning Commission in which Justice A.P. Shah had led that committee, and it gave out the basic principles that the government should consider while coming out with an Aadhaar Act. I think the BJP government needs to brush aside its ego and look into those recommendations and those made by the Congress party and Mr. Jairam Ramesh on the floor of the House.
All right. We're running out of time. We're running out of time, but it boils down to this. We currently have the biggest public sector bank in the country pointing out that it believes that biometrics can be compromised, that identities can be compromised, that fake or false Aadhaar IDs are being generated at this point, and that our bank accounts, and this is coming from a bank, might actually be in danger. The UIDAI, the custodian of all of this data, has turned around and simply rubbished that claim without offering an investigation. And if they are investigating without offering any information about that investigation, which in a democracy is simply not okay. Now, no database can ever be completely foolproof and secure forever. We have to constantly check and test and investigate and make sure that the database remains secure. If the UIDAI is going to refuse to even investigate a problem being brought to it not by a citizen or by a journalist but by the biggest bank in the country, then we have a serious problem. As citizens, are we to believe the UIDAI that quite frankly is not offering any sort of solace or any sort of comfort, or are we to believe the State Bank of India? The UIDAI must be more forthcoming, must be willing to investigate, and must be willing to share more information with us, especially if our bank accounts and our hard-earned money is going to be hanging in the balance. Thanks for watching.